Chapter 111, The Voice of Temptation. The swamp's surface was extensive with bones from humans and creatures subtly poking out of the gray sludge. It looked like quite a number of humans and beasts had died within. There were also various ugly and bizarre plants growing within the sludge. Sharp spikes grew on the plants' branches as they swayed aimlessly through the air. It all appeared quite eerie and horrifying. The large trees around the perimeter were located on the edges of the sludge. When some leaves landed within the sludge, they would disappear without a trace in the blink of an eye, as if there was a demon hidden at the bottom of the sludge that swallowed everything. Waves of disgusting stench were emitted from the sludge and attacked the senses, causing the water mage Aphrodite and female elf Nia to crease their brows and cover their mouths, appearing quite ill at ease. When everyone's gazes landed into the swamp, Trunks continued explaining, the plants that live within are all exceedingly dangerous. The swamp will swallow all humans and beasts that venture in, and the stench in the deep regions also contain a slow toxin that drains one's energy. The Medusa that hides within this swamp appears according to its will and is very difficult to handle. Han Shao-Oh's gaze focused gravely on the large patch of swamp. His forehead creased after hearing Trunks' explanation as he privately weighed his options on how to proceed. We don't have the ability to fly and will sink into the ground as soon as we set foot into the swamp. According to what you've told us, the Medusa lives within the swamp and can completely conceal itself beneath the swamp. It can attack or retreat and holds all the advantages. The level of difficulty for us to fight it within the swamp is simply too great, Han Shao said lowly after he'd put some thought into it for a moment. Flicking a glance at Han Shao, Trunks said, the Medusa's strength greatly increases within the swamp. Even the manticore magical creature, also of the first rank, would be helpless. We don't have the ability to fly and won't be able to injure it much at all, but if the Medusa walks out of the swamp, I think all of us combined will be able to solidly triumph over the Medusa. But according to my knowledge of the Medusa, it won't leave the swamp easily. Is there anything that has an increased chance of attracting the Medusa? Han Shao asked. Shaking his head, Trunks said, I don't know. The Medusa can emit a marvelous sound, and this sound has the power of attracting humans and beasts. It will suddenly attack as soon as humans or beasts get close to the swamp and pull its prey in. Thus, the Medusa has no fear of not having enough food. I don't know what else it needs apart from this. After remaining silent for a moment, Han Shao suddenly smiled. Since this is the case, we can only use the dumbest method. We'll stand guard here and kill its prey as soon as the Medusa makes sound to lure in its prey. I think it'll be unable to resist its hunger after a few discoveries that no prey has approached it, and we'll exit the swamp then. We'll make our move together and kill it then. Yes, although this method is dumb, there's no other way. My manticore and I aren't afraid of the Medusa as long as it leaves the swamp. If we add all of you into the mix, I think it'll be impossible for it to escape death. Alright then, let's make our preparations. Several traps and simple fences were set up around the swamp, with everyone finally realizing how all-encompassing this task was when they started to undertake it. The swamp was quite vast and it was quite difficult and exhaustive to completely defend it on all sides. The group spent quite a large amount of time before wearily finishing their preparations. After resting for a night, everyone's ears were plugged the next morning as they took up watch around the perimeter in previously discussed positions. The territory of the swamp was too vast. Even with 8 people and 1 manticore split up, they were still spread a bit thin. Han Shao also released his 3 original demons and used them to patrol the surroundings of the swamp, continuously paying attention to the situation. The group waited with full attention for quite a while on the first day, but didn't discover the Medusa hunting prey. Just as Trunks had mentioned, the Medusa hunting was enough for it to be fed for more than 10 days. The group had no way of estimating when it had last hunted, and so could only continue waiting with this brute force method. The Medusa didn't hunt again on the second day, with Han Shao's original demons discovering that a portion of the sludge within the swamp had suddenly surged upwards on dusk of the third day, revealing the Medusa's form within. Just as its name stated, the Medusa's numerous strands of hair were made of live snakes. These snakes were incomparably elongated and extended in all directions of the swamp like tentacles. The Medusa's features were actually that of a beautiful woman. Her slender eyebrows and cherry lips were quite beautiful, but her mouth opened to reveal rows of sinister fangs. Its slightly revealed lower body was the body of a serpent. An ugly brown suffused its durable and thick skin, forming an indefinable bizarre contrast with its striking face. Although it displayed rows of sinister fangs from its open mouth, the Medusa was emitting an elegant and desolate sound of temptation. Han Shao and the others had long since plugged their ears but could still faintly hear the sounds. They all felt their hearts tremble as if they'd experienced a baffling sense of attraction and had the desire to investigate the source. It was a good thing that they could only hear a little and had the benefit of Trunks' repeated reminders earlier that morning. This was how they kept their heads and didn't walk towards the swamp firmly standing guard where they were, their gazes continuously roving around in all directions and always paying attention to movements around them. Slowly the sounds of small magical creatures being attracted to the previously quiet swamp traveled to them. They were trotting along happily as they involuntarily traveled in the direction of the swamp. A few larger magical creatures were also approaching from a distance. Han Shao and Trunks looked at each other, temporarily not activating the traps they had prepared earlier. The magical creatures that were appearing didn't possess much destructive power, so there was no need to use the traps. Everyone split up and carefully avoided the obstacles of the traps, making their moves mercilessly, and started hunting down the smaller magical creatures that were slowly approaching. It would appear that Trunks' injuries had recovered well. His efficiency was the highest amongst them all, and it was as if his body was another dangerous magical creature as he treaded through the trees and shrubbery, bringing with him waves of blood. He'd thoroughly cleaned up the magical creatures that had been first to approach in short order. With the aid of the Demon Slayer Edge, although Han Shao's speed was slower than Trunks, he was still much faster than the others. The Demon Slayer Edge was like a magical machine reaping lives as it twirled and easily slaughtered level 5 and 6 magical creatures. After taking care of the low-level magical creatures in their areas, Han Shao and Trunks walked to another area and helped the others handle the swiftly approaching magical creatures. After a short while, the 20 or so small magical creatures that had approached had all been wiped out by the group. The value of these small low-level magical creatures was too low, and thus, Han Shao didn't even make a move to collect the spoils of battle. In this short lull, Han Shao yanked out of the soft cloth, plugging his ears, and stood where he was with a grave expression. This greatly startled Trunks, who was beside him, as the latter made several hand gestures to Han Shao. The elegant and desolate cries seemed to be a lover murmuring lowly by his ears, giving one the uncontrollable urge to want to go to her gentle embrace and entwine themselves with her, voicing the agonies of yearning. This strange temptation instantly permeated Han Shao's mind, creating illusions for him immediately, as if it was Fanny who was calling out to him again and again in the swamp behind him. This caused him to uncontrollably lift up his feet and stride towards the swamp behind him. However, he'd only taken a few steps after raising his feet when the thoughts in Han Shao's mind churned slightly. Following that indomitable will immediately halted Han Shao where he stood. His body remained unmoving where he was as he defended against the onslaught of temptation with stubborn will. After training his magical yuan for such a long period of time, Han Shao had full confidence in his willpower. Magic and fighting aura were of no use in fighting the temptation emitted by the Medusa's voice. The only thing that could counter it was stubborn and tenacious willpower. It was precisely that Han Shao felt his current self would be able to withstand her that he'd decisively given up the cover of the soft cloth. He was attempting to see if the Medusa's allure could shake his indomitable will. The final result demonstrated that after training his magical yuan for such a long period of time, he had indeed developed an inhumanely strong will. The cries filled with temptation proved to be full of temptation at first, but slowly started losing their effect until Han Shao was no longer affected. The footsteps he'd started taking backwards once again moved forward with determination, the expression on his face carefree and natural. He was obviously not suffering under the temptation of the mesmerizing voice anymore. Trunks had been watching in astonishment from afar as he saw Han Shao struggle with some difficulty in the beginning and then easily handle things in the end. He raised his thumb from afar, acknowledging Han Shao's stubborn willpower. 5 to 6 level 3 and 4 magical creatures once again appeared in everyone's line of sight. There were also 2 frost eagles circling overhead. Han Shao, Trunks and the others cast looks of surprise and wariness at each other, focusing all their concentration on the lowly circling frost eagles. The frost eagles were obviously affected by the Medusa and looked like they intended on roosting in the swamp. They wouldn't be flying so low otherwise. Grasping the crossbow in his hands, Han Shao took aim at the outstretched throat of one of the frost eagles and an accurate bolt broke through the air. At the same time Nia and the other two mages made their moves aiming for the other frost eagle. The frost eagles were quite large and the Medusa wouldn't need to come out for at least 5 or 6 days if they fell into the swamp. This would waste all their previous efforts and thus, the group could absolutely not let the frost eagle land in the swamp. The alertness of the entranced frost eagle was obviously not as it usually was. Han Sha'o's bolt pierced through its neck and shot it down from the sky. On the other side Nia and the other two mages' attacks were a bit feeble due to the distance. Several of Nia's arrows were stuck on the frost eagle's body but didn't seem to do much damage. Upon seeing the injured frost eagle fly over their heads and head for the swamp, Han Sha'o became a bit anxious. The already fired crossbow needed a bit of time before a bolt could be loaded and the crossbow become operational again. He would never make it in time. Just as he was planning on taking out the demon slayer, Edge Trunks suddenly flung out a short sword that was imbued with Trunks fighting or sinking into the lower spine of the frost eagle. Suffering from the severe damage from the short sword, the speed of the frost eagle's flapping wings ceased noticeably. It started to slowly descend as the manticore flashed out like lightning from a distance, suddenly appearing in front of the frost eagle and slashed with its incomparably strong claws, tearing the frost eagle's neck apart. The magical creatures on the ground were all cleaned out with the efforts of the traps and 3 swordsmen. Just as everyone had heaved a sigh of relief, an elven maiden suddenly appeared in the distance. The elven maid's beauty was pure and unadorned. She was dressed in luxurious clothes as she swiftly approached Han Sha'o's direction with a blank look on her face. Horror gripping him, Han Sha'o immediately shot out and blocked the female elf's advancing footsteps. He opened his mouth to say stop, hurry up and stop. It was a pity that the mesmerized maidlet had obviously temporarily lost her senses and completely ignored Han Sha'o's words as she continued to walk towards the swamp. Not everyone has the same willpower as you. Stop trying to persuade her and just grab her. Trunks couldn't help but roar out when he saw that the female elf approaching the swamp step by step and Han Sha'o was still trying to persuade her. Han Sha'o blinked and finally reached out with the speed of lightning upon seeing the female elf make her way closer to the swamp, wrapping her in his arms and hauling her away from the perimeter, ignoring her struggles. Brother! Brother! The female elf cried out continuously and struggled continuously in Han Sha'o's arms. When she discovered that she couldn't break free, her small fists beat fiercely on Han Sha'o's chest as she desolately wailed, brother. This level of attack was neither painful nor ticklish on Han Sha'o's chest. He held the female elf tightly as he walked further away from the swamp. The Medusa's elegant voice became more and more hurried, but no more humans or beasts appeared in the surroundings. After a short while the Medusa finally listlessly stopped its calls of temptation and its body concealed within the swamp slowly revealed itself. Chapter 112, Slaying the Snake. Together, when the Medusa slowly emerged from the swamp, Han Sha'o discovered that it was even bigger than he'd imagined. Its hair full of small snakes was waving wildly as they extended in dance. Its serpentine lower body was as thick as a bucket and its body was 5 or 6 meters long. Everyone be careful, I think the Medusa is ready to leave the swamp to hunt. Han Sha'o could clearly see the Medusa's movements through the observations of his original demons and he immediately warned everyone. Bad guy, big bad guy. A scream rang out from his arms after Han Sha'o's alarmed words and the beautiful and pure elven maiden in his arms started erupting in violent action, railing her small fists into Han Sha'o's chest accompanied by a look of panic. Seeing that the female elf had regained her senses, Han Sha'o immediately stopped holding her as the demon slayer edge abruptly appeared in his hand. His eyes calmly patrolled the 4 corners as he planned on finding an appropriate location to fight the Medusa. What do you want to do? The elven maiden was greatly startled as she thought Han Sha'o wanted to kill her. She took 2 steps back in a panic, a magic staff suddenly appearing in her hand and sent a sharp blade of wind hurtling towards Han Sha'o's head with a magical incantation. Damn it, what are you attacking me for? Han Sha'o immediately roared furiously at this elf after he dodged it. However, It looked like the elven maiden was even more irate than Han-Sha-Oh. She was staring at Han-Sha-Oh with extreme enmity and also said huffily, "What did you do to me just now?" The hungry Medusa had obviously lost its patience when it saw that no prey had entered the swamp. Its colossal body moved swiftly within the swamp and drew close to Han-Sha-Oh's group. Han-Sha-Oh didn't have the time to waste with the female elf at this moment and beckoned quickly with his hand when he saw the female elven archer Nia walk over from the distance. He pointed at the clueless elven maiden and said, "Explain everything to her." Han-Sha-Oh immediately left quickly after saying these words and arrived where Trunks, Aphrodite and the others were. He spoke urgently. "It looks like the Medusa couldn't hold out against its anger and is attempting to leave the swamp to find prey. It's heading in this direction. Everyone be on guard." The two mages hurry and leave, take up positions in the big tree behind the traps. "The two swordsmen should split up and don't let the Medusa discover your tracks. Han, you and I leave temporarily. When the Medusa appears in a moment, we'll block off its path of retreat." It's extremely difficult to handle a Medusa creature within the swamp, but it may not even be up to the task of fighting my Manticore when it leaves the swamps. Therefore we have a high probability of killing it, but the only thing is to not let it discover our tracks. We'll find it dreadfully hard to fight it if it returns to the swamp. Trunks suddenly spoke up loudly at this time and quickly instructed everyone to return to their posts. At such a pivotal moment, even the other adventurers who previously bore enmity towards Trunks didn't say anything else. They all nodded and started moving according to their positions in accordance with Trunks' instructions. Han-Sha-Oh nodded at Trunks and suddenly left, avoiding the path that the Medusa would definitely take. Han-Sha-Oh's grasp of the greater picture far exceeded everyone else's due to the information he received from the original demons. The Medusa looked quite cautious as it warily crawled onto the shore and wasn't in a hurry to immediately leave the marsh. It dithered by the side of the marsh as if contemplating something. The magical creatures that had appeared just now had been stripped of all their valuables and their corpses abandoned in the enormous trap that had been previously prepared. The Medusa's beautiful head turned around a few times, her watery eyes appearing a bit confused as to why not a single human or beast had approached after hearing her alluring voice. After a while, the Medusa still hadn't seemed to think it through and finally left the marsh, walking towards the place where Aphrodite and the others lay in wait. Through the observations of the original demon, Han-Sha-Oh discovered that the previously angry elf had finally calmed down after Nia's persuading and was looking with interest in his direction. She finally backed up unwillingly towards the back under Nia's repeated encouragement, but she wasn't willing to move too far. After leaving the marsh, the Medusa cautiously proceeded forward. Han-Sha-Oh and Trunks circled around and appeared from another direction, the marsh completely blocking off the Medusa's path of retreat. Han-Sha-Oh and Trunks traded a meaningful glance and approached the Medusa from behind, at the same time soundlessly prepared to make a move against it at any time. Finally, when the Medusa was 10 or so meters away from the marsh, its undulating body suddenly drew near to the trap. Its bizarre body was elongated. When its upper body perceived the existence of the trap, it leveraged the strength of its lower body and slowly eased its slanted body out of the trap and moved away with the undulations of its body. At this moment, a water dragon and lightning suddenly flashed through the sky, crashing down onto the Medusa with a thunderous roar. Up ahead, not too far away, Nia also pulled back her bow and fired. Several sharp arrows broke through the air and headed straight for the Medusa. On the side, Gordon and the two other swordsmen swung out together and chopped down a branch that had been hoisted up high. A tremendous crack rang out as the sharp end of the thick tree branch came shooting straight down to the Medusa. The Medusa immediately realized that it had fallen into an ambush, and its lower body magically curled around a big tree next to it. Its body had been about to fall into the trap but flew high through the air and crashed back down onto the ground with a thud. The branch that had been shooting towards the Medusa shot past where its neck had been before the Medusa dodged, thudding into the bottom of the trap and ringing out loudly. Aphrodite's water dragon crashed into the Medusa's body but obviously didn't reach the amount of destructive power it should have. When the Medusa shook its head, the water dragon dispersed into countless water droplets. It was rather the bow bolt of thunder and lightning that caused the Medusa to cry out in pain. Only one of the Nia's arrows pierced into the soft tender nape of the Medusa's neck, but it didn't sink in that far and didn't cause a fatal injury. The Medusa's frantic violent writhing proved that it hadn't suffered grievous wounds. After the first wave of attacks had landed, the Medusa swiftly turned around and retreated. It didn't attempt to seek revenge on the people who had attacked it and crawled directly towards the marsh. It seemed that it wanted to retreat and fight back after entering the marsh. It was a pity at this time that Han Shao and Trunks had long since been ready. Brutal milky white fighting aura and the ear-rattling whistle from the Demon Slayer edge rang out as they both made for the Medusa, suddenly appearing on the Medusa neck and cheek. The Medusa had been able to easily handle the previous attacks, but Han Shao and Trunks' combined attacks finally let it sense the threat of death. These two waves of attacks were swift and fierce. The domineering killing intent encompassed within caused the highly ranked Medusa to deploy all of its energy. Its enormous body suddenly became incredibly agile as its numerous snakes for hair suddenly danced. The hundreds and thousands of small snakes danced wildly in the air, transforming into a sky of tentacles to obstruct Trunks and Han Shao's attacks. Trunks' milky white fighting aura and Han Shao's Demon Slayer edge attacks hurtled into the midst of the numerous dancing snakes and instantly filled the air with a bloody mist. The small snakes were pulverized into bloody chunks that were sent flying and plopped onto the ground. Both of their attacks were greatly weakened at the same time and couldn't approach the Medusa's vital parts at all. The small snakes that had been chopped off wriggled on the ground and struggled in Han Shao's and Trunks' direction, attempting to swallow the two. Huh. Go to hell. Trunks snorted coldly as a longsword once again appeared in his hand. However, it wasn't the board sword that had been chipped by the Demon Slayer wretch. Trunks' body was surrounded by milky white aura, and a gust of flying sand and small rocks exploded towards the small snakes approaching him swiftly, making for the Medusa. On the other side a figure dashed out like lightning. It was the Manticore, who had long been lying in wait. It maintained the same speed as Trunks and shot towards the Medusa. Han Shao remained unmoving where he stood, closing his eyes instead and manipulating the Demon Slayer edge with all his concentration. The small snakes that covered the Medusa's head all screamed as they one by one turned into a bloody rain that filled the sky. The indestructible Demon Slayer edge reaped the life of one small snake after another and chopped off half of the Medusa's small snakes in the span of an instant. The other adventurers in the distance all surged out from the back when they saw that the Medusa had no avenue of retreat and was heavily injured. Even more attacks appeared with their combined efforts. Trunks and the Manticore were even more fierce as they directly challenged the Medusa. Trunks had turned into a cloud of milky white aura, and his every move caused the Medusa's blood and flesh to fly everywhere. Ranked on the same level as the Medusa, the Manticore circled the Medusa on the ground and dashed to and fro. Its claws that were as sharp as blades left injuries on the Medusa so deep that bone could be seen. When all of the small snakes on the Medusa's head had been executed by Han Shao's Demon Slayer edge, the Medusa's struggles suddenly became quite listless and its writhing body suddenly became quiet. Chapter 113. This is called a hang glider. By the time that everyone had surrounded the Medusa, it had already fallen and lay without moving. Trunks leapt onto the body with sword in hand, slicing open its head and taking out the most valuable item from the Medusa with a look of joy. Trunks dug out the core of the level 1 magic beast and the blue blood near its core. When Han Shao had dashed over from the distance, the matters on this side had been completed and even the corpse of the Medusa had been pushed into the depths of the trap. The elf off in the distance followed closely behind Nia, poking her head out to gaze at the Medusa within the trap, saying softly, "How does this ugly fellow have such a lovely voice? Angelica, you should hurry and go back. We have other things to do." Nia frowned involuntarily when she saw the young female elf look on with a face full of curiosity. "No, Sister Nia, let me stay with you. This is much more fun than being at Grandpa's." Angelica smiled sweetly at Nia and shook her head, speaking shyly. After Han Shao made his way over, Trunks took out the magical core and the precious blood that he retrieved and handed it over to Han Shao. "I'll keep 10 drops of the Medusa's blue blood. You can split the rest with the others." A small bottle filled with the Medusa's blue blood was stored within a crystalline white vase. That and the Medusa's magical core were all shoved into Han Shao-Oh's hands. Grasping the items that Trunks had handed over, Han Shao asked, "How much blood does Odysseus need to fully recover?" "I think 5 drops of the Medusa's essence blood should be enough to help Odysseus fully recover. The essence blood has a miraculous effect. Not only can it increase the recovery speed of injuries, but it can reconnect separated limbs. If one's arms or legs are broken, the essence blood of the Medusa will allow the limbs to reconnect and grow without affecting movement in the future. Therefore the Medusa's essence blood is very precious." Trunks looked at Han Shao and solemnly explained the preciousness of the Medusa's essence blood. Nodding, Han Shao also took out a medicine flask and poured out half of the Medusa's essence blood and gave the rest of the bottle along with the level 1 magical creature core to Aphrodite. He said, "These items belong to you guys. Split it up with them after this is all over." Aphrodite looked askance at Han Shao and opened her mouth to say, "Isn't it a bit too much to give us all this? I think we should only receive either the Medusa's essence blood or the magical core. After all, the two of you put forth the most effort in this plan to kill the Medusa. We only served as a sort of distraction and hindrance. Take it for now, we have other things to do. If you've further considerations, why not wait until you've taken care of Odysseus? Odysseus told you before to temporarily listen to my words. I think you remember that. The magical core of the Medusa could be used to create some mysterious instruments that would also have the same mesmerizing effect. If sold, it would absolutely be sold for a premium price." However, the Medusa wasn't Han Shao-Oh's goal this time, but rather the fruit of Dagmar that would be incredibly useful to Han Shao-Oh's cultivation. As useful as the things on the Medusa were, they had no direct usefulness for Han Shao-Oh. Therefore he was extremely generous in portioning out the spoils of battle from the Medusa. Han Shao did so also because he hoped that when he obtained the fruit of Dagmar later, he would have a higher chance of taking more of the fruits. This was what he needed the most at the moment. Now that the Medusa had been cleared from the swamp, the only things left within the swamp are the man-eating plants and permeating toxins. It was said that the fruit of Dagmar grew within the man-eating plants. "We can come up with a plan to find the fruit." Trunks looked at Han Shao and opened his mouth to make the suggestion. Nodding, Han Shao didn't say much and walked towards the swamp deep in thought. When he came to the edge of the swamp, he randomly picked up one of the small stones on the shore and threw it into the distance. When the stone landed, it sank into the swamp within the blink of an eye and vanished without a trace. Of those present, no one could fly through the air, and only Han Shao-Oh's 3 original demons could patrol around the swamp. When he arrived, Han Shao sat down cross-legged with a darkened face and focused his complete attention on manipulating the 3 original demons. They danced through the vast swamp and attempted to locate the fruit of Dagmar. When Trunks and the others arrived, they saw Han Shao sitting cross-legged without a sound, with even his eyes closed. Everyone was rather baffled. "Sister Nia, what's wrong with that bad man?" The pure elven maiden Angelica looked at Han Shao in surprise and asked Nia in a sweet voice. Nia also didn't know what Han Shao was doing and shook her head when she heard Angelica ask. She said oddly, "I don't know either, but Han Shao is a marvelous person. I think he's doing some magical things again." Trunks understood that some obscure secrets were concealed within Han Shao's body. These secrets could cause even him, a fierce and domineering swordsmaster, to have extreme misgivings toward Han Shao. When he saw Han Shao's bizarre appearance this time, he immediately thought that Han Shao was doing something mysterious again. He immediately focused his attentions on observing Han Shao's body and any abnormalities around him, attempting to find out the mysteries that shrouded Han Shao. Unfortunately, even with Trunks' extraordinary abilities and uncanny eye for fighting aura and magical power, the original demons had no fighting aura within them and weren't supported by magic. This made Trunks' observation come up empty-handed, as he had absolutely no idea why Han Shao did what he did. One of the original demons made its way into the midst of the thickest patch of man-eating plants and suddenly discovered plants that looked humanesque within a claret red mound of sludge. This plant looked like an ordinary person, replete with hands, feet, waist and cheeks. It was hidden in the sludge beneath the waist with a thick stalk that was similar to a root, and there were 3 brains that looked like they had lost their fleshy coverings on the neck that were exposed to the air. The appearance of these 3 brains were the same as the fruit of Dagmar that everyone had described. Taking a deep breath, and Han Shao opened his eyes as an excited light sparkled and danced within his eyes. He said the fruit of Dagmar is within that patch of man-eating plants. It has a humanesque stalk, but 3 fruits shaped like a human brain have blossomed on it. The fruit of Dagmar is indeed within the swamp, but how should we reach it? Aphrodite was first overjoyed at hearing this news, but then immediately reacted with a woebegone expression. Yes, none amongst us are at the archmage level and have no way of flying above the swamp. Gordon frowned and said equally weakly. Trunks looked at Han Shao, who was deep in thought for a moment himself, and said, Han, all sorts of poisonous insects fill the swamp and there are slow-acting toxins within the air. If you fall into the swamp accidentally, it would be very unrealistic to want to leave alive. I've thought for a moment, and the only way is to make use of a few of the towering trees on the side of the swamp. If we make use of the trees' slender branches and swing out fiercely, we'll be able to briefly fly over the center of the swamp. However, I can't promise that the oscillation force of the branches will be able to send someone directly to the other side. In addition, you'd only swing through the center of the swamp for a brief moment. I think it's impossible to just so happen to swing by the fruit of Dagmar and obtain it whilst under attack from the man-eating plants in such a short amount of time. Han Shao's brow remained creased in thought after Trunks said his piece, with a smile breaking out on his face all of a sudden. He stared at the female elf Angelica, all smiles, and spoke to her as gently as a big gray wolf talking to a white rabbit. Beautiful cute elf, did you cast wind blades on me just now? A magic that belongs to the wind family of magic? Pulling the slightly panicked Angelica behind her, Nia looked a bit oddly at Han Shao, like she was a mother hen protecting a small chick. Han, are you still begrudging what's just happened and planning on taking revenge against Angelica? Angelica has a noble status amongst us elves, so I suggest that you don't make trouble for her. In addition, I won't allow you to do anything to her. Anyone with smiles on his face is no one good, that's what Grandpa told me. I feel very perturbed by his smile, he must not be anything good. Angelica behind Nia glared at Han Shao and proclaimed. Shaking his head with a rueful smile, Han Shao said to Nia, just what are you thinking about? I need Angelica to help me with a small favor if she's a wind mage. Nia let out a sigh of relief after hearing Han Shao's words, turned around to look at Angelica peacefully and said with a smile, he's not a bad guy. You were casting wind magic just now. What level wind mage are you? I'm only a journeyman mage, so I can't fly. Don't tell me to get that fruit, I'll fall. Angelica squealed as her slender calf swabbled her body, floating into the air. She was holding her breath and her tender small face turned red from effort. She seemed to gather all her strength and took 2 ferocious steps upwards into the air, then fell down to the ground with a clatter. She spread her hands at those assembled and displayed a powerless expression. Her performance just now had been to tell everyone that she truly couldn't and that she would fall down like this. I just need you to cast the journeyman magic Grimwind in a moment. Was there really a need for you to prove your ineptness? Han Shao didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at this bizarre little elf. Sitting up abruptly from the ground, Angelica dusted off herself and stuck out her small chest, saying proudly, so it's just the Grimwind spell? I, Angelica, promise to help you. What do you need me to do? Trunks and everyone else gathered around Han Shao at this moment with looks of curiosity, waiting for Han Shao to respond. Han Shao's face was solemn as he stared deeply at Angelica, saying lowly, in a moment, as soon as I leap off from a branch, you must cast the Grimwind spell at me immediately. Remember that you must cast it when I push off, and be sure to grasp the best timing. Han, are you really planning on doing this? The force from the branch's velocity won't be enough to support you to the other side of the swamp. Even with the aid of the Grimwind spell, it's still quite unrealistic. In addition, the Grimwind spell will only increase your speed in flying away, further decreasing your chances of grabbing the fruit of Dagmar. I highly recommend finding another way. Trunks frowned as he looked at Han Shao, attempting to convince him. Shaking his head, Han Shao's expression was resolute as he said to Trunks, no need, I wouldn't do so if I wasn't fully assured of success. All of you be at ease, I have other methods as well. After saying these words, Han Shao took out a tent amidst everyone's surprise and slashed several times with the Demon Slayer edge in his hand. The tent tripped apart. Han Shao then moved steadily and took out some durable rope to wrap around the tent. After a while, Han Shao stopped his movements and said with a smile, I've created a simple tool. With the aid of this tool and the help of the Grim Wind spell, I am confident that I can pass through this patch of swamp and under the conditions of slow speed. Han, what kind of strange device is this? You say it can help you cross through the swamp. I really don't believe it. Aphrodite looked in confusion at the item within Han Shao's hand and said in disbelief, this is called a hang glider and it can do it. Han Shao picked up the simplistic hang glider that he'd modified from a tent and slowly crawled up to the tallest and most thickly grown tree on the side of the swamp. Beneath everyone's disbelieving eyes, have you really decided? Although Trunks still didn't quite believe it, he was unable to penetrate all of the miraculousness of Han Shao, and thus, he didn't continue to try to convince him. He only asked for one last time after seeing Han Shao crawl up the highest part of the tree and grasp the tinsel pliable branch. I'm ready. Are you ready, Angelica? Han Shao nodded and asked the beautiful elven maiden Angelica in the distance. Angelica nodded proudly and said with great confidence, no problem, you can start. Chapter 114, Changes in the Swamp. Han Shao pushed off with all his strength and flew out using the pliable branch, his body drawing an arc through the air. When he returned to his starting point, he stomped down on the branch fiercely with both feet and his body once again flew out like lightning. After swinging back and forth like this a few times, the degree to which Han Shao's body was swinging out became larger and larger and his speed increased further and further as well. The group watched him with astonishment as their hearts fluttered up and down in accordance with Han Shao's swinging. Just as Han Shao felt that the speed of his swinging had reached its maximum, he called out loudly, Angelica, prepare the Grim Wind spell. Han Shao suddenly let go and flew out towards the other side of the swamp under the enormous momentum behind his motions. At the same time that he left the branch, the simple hang glider that he'd stored back in his space ring reappeared. It was as if a pair of wings had suddenly appeared beneath Han Shao as he held them beneath his body. At the same time, Angelica confidently chanted the Grim Wind spell and a violent gust started blowing where Han Shao was, propelling him forward as he hovered over the swamp. If it hadn't been for the hang glider, Han Shao would have surely flown out like lightning and possibly fallen into the swamp like lightning as well, but with the aid of the hang glider and the movement afforded by the Grim Wind spell, it allowed Han Shao to magically but slowly float towards the center of the swamp with an unhurried, unrushed pace. Oh my gosh, he's really doing it! Nia exclaimed in surprise with a look of incredulity on her face. The other observers were equally astonished, with only Trunks maintaining his calm as he said lowly with a look of gravity, the toxic gas within the center of the swamp is the heaviest and the man-eating plants there are equally difficult to manage. It won't be that easy to grab the fruit within a short period of time. I hope he succeeds as he wishes. Everyone finally remembered Han Shao's goal when they heard Trunks' words. He wasn't simply traveling across the swamp, but the most important thing was that he needed to gain the fruit of Dagmar. After Trunks' splash of cold water, everyone's expression grew heavy once again. As he slowly approached the center of the swamp, Han Shao focused his concentration and tightly gripped the Demon Slayer edge within his hand. His eyes, however, were tightly closed as he observed all abnormalities within the center through the original demons. Finally, the Demon Slayer flew out Han Shao's hand with an ear-piercing whistle. The man-eating plants all extended their life-reaping branches and twigs as soon as the Demon Slayer edge entered the swamp, attempting to entangle it within the swamp. However, the Demon Slayer edge's keenness didn't let Han Shao down. Large patches of the branches and leaves were sent falling into the swamp under the Demon Slayer edge's stance. A patch of man-eating plants had already been cleared away in the span of an instant. As Han Shao approached with his hang glider, the Demon Slayer edge hewed through everything according to Han Shao's will as expressed through the Demon Slayer edge. In this moment, Han Shao, with his eyes closed, seemed to have reached some accord with the Demon Slayer edge, as if he had suddenly eventually become that indestructible blade. The three original demons appeared in that area at the same time, observing all changes around the fruit of Dagmar from three different directions. As Han Shao slowly approached, the patch of man-eating plants broke apart beneath the demon slayer edge's slashing. When Han Shao was a few meters away from the center, Han Shao suddenly opened his previously firmly closed eyes. His body slanted at the same time as his hand grabbed one of the ropes, fully focusing his eyes on the fruit of Dagmar. He paid no heed to the man-eating plants around him, including the slowly spreading but faint poisonous gas, as if none of these dangers existed. The people observing around the outside were also quite nervous right now. Angelica's breathing was increasingly heavy and her face was red with excitement, as if thinking that this situation was quite thrilling. Whoosh! The rope suddenly flew out, with the demon slayer edge that had been ripping through the man-eating plants suddenly flying upside down towards Han Shao. Under Han Shao's will, the end of the demon slayer edge brought the rope with it as it flew to loop around the fruit of Dagmar. A disgusting stench suddenly permeated Han Shao's surroundings, making his chest suddenly feel tight in that moment. His mind was briefly disoriented, and the demon slayer edge that had been making for the fruit of Dagmar suddenly descended directionless as Han Shao lost his bearings. "Be careful, hang on!" Aphrodite suddenly called out loudly from the shore as she reminded Han Shao to keep his concentration focused. His magical yuan automatically flowing to his chest, slowly removing the heaviness in his chest wherever the miraculous magical yuan passed through. His slightly dizzy mind finally stabilized. As his thoughts moved, the demon slayer edge that had been about to sink into the swamp suddenly emitted a shrill scream. Its sharp edge trembled a few times as it flew like lightning towards the fruit of Dagmar, bringing the rope with it and landing around the neck-shaped part of the fruit of Dagmar. Han Shao took a deep breath in and tugged sharply with his hand. The rope pulled tight on the man-eating plant. Having completed its mission, the demon slayer edge churned as branches and leaves were cut off, with multicolored liquid flowing out of some of the leaves. Just as everyone's hearts were in their throats, the fruit of Dagmar slowly left the swamp little by little. Han Shao increased his strength and then, with the aid of the demon slayer edge, cut off the fruit of Dagmar from the waist. Han Shao then abruptly lifted up and the fruit of Dagmar came flying out of the swamp along with the neck and arm-shaped portion of the plant. Slowly exerting force and withdrawing the fruit of Dagmar, the hang glider enabled Han Shao to fly through the center of the swamp and slowly travel to the other side. "Rob them!" A shrill yell suddenly rang out at this moment, following shortly thereafter by 4 arrows blazing with fire flying directly at Han Shao's body. At the same time, the sludge on the ground suddenly formed into an enormous hand and grabbed at Han Shao's legs. "Oh damn it, enemies!" On the shore, Trunks suddenly cursed and yelled loudly. Up in the hang glider, Han Shao was only 10 or so meters from shore. The threat from the sludge-formed hand proved to be of greatest threat, forcing Han Shao to call back the demon slayer edge to handle the great hand. The 4 burning arrows would obviously not be that easily handled. Han Shao had no place to exert force from in the hang glider and thus appeared a bit bedraggled. He blocked 2 arrows with some difficulty, with one of them still connecting with Han Shao's calf, bringing him a fiery pain. Han Shao could only slightly divert the other arrow's direction, but it still landed on the bottom part of the hand glider and caused it start burning. "Be careful, he's making it to shore." More than 10 people stood on the other side of the swamp, all of them waiting in readiness for Han Shao to make it over. Their outfits seemed to indicate that they were mercenaries or some sort of private troops. All sorts of professions were mixed in. Boundless fury suffusing his heart, Han Shao wished to kill every single person standing on the other shore at this moment. These people looked like they had arrived on the other side of shore by coincidence, because Trunks and the others were separated by the entire swamp and they'd been too focused on Han Shao. Their alertness had greatly decreased and thus hadn't discovered this group, which resulted in them successfully ambushing Han Shao. The fruit of Dagmar was finally stored within Han Shao's space ring. During this entire process, he was in great pain now that a flaming arrow was stuck to his calf. The hang glider was also slowly burning and was crisping the sleeves of Han Shao's shirt, forcing Han Shao to endure the agony of being burned. These people were ruthless, all right. As the burning Han Shao and hang glider drifted inexorably towards the ground. Some of them fitted another round of crossbow bolts into their crossbows and attempted to shoot Han Shao dead in midair. The Manticora's roars suddenly rang out at this time. Han Shao then saw a furious Trunks with killing intent shooting out of him dash towards this group of people with an upraised sword. Not too far away, Aphrodite and the others were also extremely enraged and quickly approached the other shore. At this time, thanks to the efforts of the Demon Slayer Edge, the sludge hand that was likely to have been formed by an earth mage had returned to a peaceful state. When the whistling sounds from arrows rang out, the Demon Slayer Edge had returned to Han Shao's side and helped pulverize the crossbow bolts, bearing the agonizing pain, vast swathes of his arms being burned and crisp hair. Han Shao finally landed onto the other shore with the hotly flaming hang glider with soul-searing hatred. When Han Shao yanked out the arrow stuck in his calf, he stood up resolutely with a scarily grimacing expression. A pair of proud, cold and incredibly dangerous eyes shot towards these ambushers. Chapter 115. Demon Han Shao, who are you? Trunks first heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Han Shao had arrived safely, then fixed these strangers with a cold eye. Don't bother with who we are. Leave behind the Medusa's core and blood as well as the fruit of Dagmar. You can keep your lives and leave. One of the adept mages held a magic staff in his hands and said with a sinister face, Leon, we can't let them off that easily. Hey, look, 3 beautiful girls have come running. We haven't had girls in so long. Those 3 girls have to stay behind for our enjoyment as well. Another senior swordsman, ferociously built like a gorilla, shouldered a broadsword as large as his body on his shoulder as he leered with a lascivious grin. Angelo, your words make some of sense. I didn't see the 3 chits just now. Ha, leave the 3 beautiful ladies behind and all your belongings. Strength is above all within the dark forest. You can get the hell out now if you want to live. The adept mage Leon also looked at Nia, Aphrodite and Angelica running in from the distance with great interest and spoke with a merry twinkle. There were more than 10 people in this group, with not only mages and swordsmen but also archers, priests and thieves. They were all well experienced and possessed uncommon strength. What to the likes of you? Han Shao had walked over from the distance by now. He was suffused with a dangerous presence that he wasn't bothering to suppress. Having been burned, Han Shao appeared quite grim and horrifying. Everyone felt a bit shocked and fearful as he drew closer step by step. Han, are you alright? Trunks couldn't help but immediately ask when he saw Han Shao's outrageous appearance. This ugly thing is an eyesore. He clings rather stubbornly to life and hasn't died yet. Brothers, take him out first. Angelo called out with a cold face and spoke directly. Gordon, Aphrodite and the others had finally made it over. Han Shao didn't say another word as his body flew out quickly and made directly for Angelo. A faint black demonic mist slowly exuded from Han Shao's body. His desire to kill and anger reaching unheralded heights, it caused abnormalities in Han Shao's unstable molded spirit realm mentality. The black demonic chi leaked out due to the effects of the magical yuan as Han Shao sank into a stupor. There were only the violent emotions of bloodlust and destruction left within his heart as his eyes turned a frightening ghastly white with no black pupils left. This kid is a bit strange. Everyone be careful. Han Shao's current demonic appearance gave Angelo a fright and the latter immediately called out. Although Trunks and the others couldn't see Han Shao's expression from where they stood, they could also feel that something wasn't quite right with Han Shao at the moment. Tendrils of black demonic chi interspersed with frightening evil presence arose from Han Shao's body. This kind of presence made one feel terror rise from the depths of their hearts. Let's go and help Han kill these people who wanted to take advantage of him when he was in trouble. Gordon roared out and took the lead in dashing out. When everyone behind him saw Gordon make his move, they also started mobilizing without a bit of doubt. Only Angelica stood there a bit at a loss of what to do with herself. She spoke to Nia, who was seeking a large tree for cover. Hey sister Nia, should I help? Just protect yourself. It's too dangerous right now, Nia called back impatiently as she'd already notched an arrow into her bowstring and taken aim at a human archer in the distance. A forlorn and desolate wail permeated the entire surroundings in the span of an instant, as if it It was the desperate wail of a demon residing in the depths of hell. Everyone's hearts trembled and their skin was clammy, utterly shocked by this bizarre soul-wrenching shrill scream. They looked around frantically to try to identify the source of the sound. The sound's coming from that kid. Angelo was horrified as the veins on his forehead jumped, shouting as he looked at the swiftly approaching Hanshao. Everyone finally noticed that the source of the sound as he shouted out this warning was the demon slayer edge that was flying close to Hanshao. A thick demonic chi was bubbling up from the blade of the demon slayer edge and encircled Hanshao's body. The black demonic chi that circled around it danced like a demon that swallowed everything, causing others to feel an exceedingly evil visual impact. Kill him first. Angelo was truly panicking internally now. An exceeding sense of discomfort rose in his heart as he suddenly started hollering. Everyone could see Hanshao's peculiarities now. Even Trunks, baptized by countless battles, felt an internal chill when he saw Hanshao's current condition. He couldn't understand just what had happened to Hanshao. The enemies were even more frightened and could only think of destroying this unknown danger. Suddenly several violent magical attacks and bolts from crossbows flew through the air, shooting toward Hanshao. Even Trunks would have found it difficult to deal with such ferocious attacks. However, the currently berserking Hanshao emitted a low roar like that of a wild beast and pushed off with both feet, his body seeming to actually fly a few feet through the air and completely sidestepped the attacks, shooting directly towards Angelo. In the area where Hanshao had just pushed off, several crossbow bolts and magical attacks from the enemy landed around a pair of sunken footprints. Damn it! Angelo frowned and suddenly discovered that the frightfully grimacing Hanshao was heading directly towards him. There was only the adept mage Leon next to him, and the latter would be of no use at all. He could only raise his broadsword and strike a good stance, ready to give Hanshao a painful blow. The demon slayer edge that had been orbiting Hanshao magically flew out with a soul-entrancing whistle, making directly for Angelo like a demon to its food. His heart-chilling Angelo suddenly exerted force as dark green fighting aura surged out of the broadsword in his hand, forming a cross and striking at the demon slayer edge that was descending through the air. A metallic clashing sound abruptly spread from where the demon slayer edge and Angelo's weapon made contact. After a round of howling, a crack actually appeared in the demon slayer edge as it swung to the side. Whilst Angelo was stricken in shock, Hanshao's body descended from the air and crashed into Angelo with a loud bang. A biting scream emitted from Angelo's mouth as painful keens sounded from a person who had just been arrogantly domineering. Hanshao descended like a demon had possessed him and straddled Angelo's body, the demon slayer edge ripping at Angelo's body. Angelo fought back, his blows interspersed with fighting aura. However, Hanshu had no reaction when the attacks struck his body and only responded with even more ferocious attacks. His palms seemed to have become sharp weapons as he ripped off Angelo's ears and sank his nose into his cheeks. The flesh within Angelo's eyes became a blurry, bloody mess, his eyes having already exploded into plasma and were leaking out in a gooey mess. Large swathes of flesh and skin on Angelo's chest were being ripped out beneath Hanshao's crazy tearing. The scene made everyone else's scalp go numb. Save me, save me. At this moment Angelo's features had been obliterated and he looked even more frightening than Hanshao. Only his mouth was left and able to voice desperate cries for help. Having sunk into a demonic stupor, only the urges of bloodlust and destruction remained within his heart. There was no more of the usual placidity and restraint that could be normally found. He was a bit irritated by Angelo's calls and swung a fist down at Angelo's mouth. The sound of teeth breaking rang out as Angelo moaned feebly and spat out bits of teeth. "Oh my gosh, how did we enrage such a madman!" Leon, not too far in the distance, was getting an eyeful of Hanshao's brutal torture. A cold fear grew in his heart as his body trembled and he gave an involuntary scream. Blow after blow from Hanshao's fists landed on Angelo's cheeks and neck. He'd been moaning continuously before, but his chest now faced upwards and his cheek was against the ground. This posture noticeably indicated that his neck had already been broken and Angelo was long without breath. What's happened to Han? Why is he being so brutal? Aphrodite and the others had been about ready to attack the other side when they were all scared senseless, even forgetting to raise their hands against the enemies, and could only stand there dumbly watching Hanshao continue his violence. Angelica, stay there and don't come any nearer. Nia saw that Angelica was curious and wanted to come over to check things out, and so suddenly yelled out loudly to prevent her from drawing close. She wasn't willing to let Angelica see such a bloody scene. Don't let them get away. Although Han is a bit out of sorts right now, we should still assist him. Although Trunks had killed his share of people, Han Sha-O's current violence also made his scalp numb. However, Trunks was someone who'd weathered strong winds and big waves as well and understood what should be done at this point. Trunks rushed over with his manticore milky white aura flaring out from his longsword and immediately killed a robber and an archer. His milky white aura represented his identity as a sword master, and the appearance of the manticore indicated Trunks' identity. It was only now that these people finally realized that they had gotten entangled with Trunks of the Dark Forest, and that Leon cursed and said in pain, "Damn it, why were we so unlucky? It's enough that we met one crazy madman, but now we've run into this notable harbinger of bad luck. Damn it, why is it Trunks?" Everyone run. Another swordsman also cried out with some trepidation. The group of more than 10, which contained senior swordsmen and adept mages as well as all sorts of other professions, actually had more than enough strength to defeat them. Even with Trunks on the other side, Han Sha-O's group may not have full confidence in defeating them, but the other side was overwhelmed by Trunks' reputation and Han Sha-O's outrageous reactions, and thus made the decision to retreat. "You stay here, I'll chase after them." Seeing that Aphrodite and the others were attempting to follow them, Trunks suddenly called out loudly. His voice had just sounded and didn't even have the time to taper off when the berserk Han Sha-O suddenly leapt up from Angelo's corpse and dashed out with the Demon Slayer edge, making for Leon, fleeing towards safety at the speed of lightning. "That demon's catching up to us." "Leon, how did you decide on picking on them? You've doomed us all." One swordsman turned his head back to see Han Sha-O appear and complained bitterly to Leon. "Everyone split up. Although I can't tell how strong that demon is, he absolutely wouldn't be much weaker than Trunks, given that he could kill Angelo just like that. You better hope that you don't run into him or you'll be tortured to death." Leon immediately changed direction after calling out these orders. Everyone had also witnessed Han Sha-O's brutality just now and didn't need to be reminded by Leon. All of them suddenly changed direction and formed groups of 2 or 3, splitting off into several directions to escape from the premises. Although they'd heard of Trunks' might, they also knew that Trunks had never killed someone so brutally. Therefore they'd rather bump into Trunks and didn't want to run into the equally unknown but much more brutal demonic Han Sha-O. Whoosh sounded out as Han Sha-O appeared and rushed ahead without stopping. He finally caught up with 2 journeyman swordsmen and 1 thunder adept mage in front of a river. When the 3 of them saw that the person ahead of them was Han Sha-O, they all displayed expressions of fear. Their bodies all trembled uncontrollably, and when they saw that Han Sha-O was swiftly approaching, the adept mage finally roared, "Damn it, let's fight him head to head or we'll all be tortured to death." After the Thunder Mage had spoken, he recited a string of incantations and 5 bolts of lightning like traversing dragons appeared out of thin air, snaking towards Han Sha-O. The 2 journeyman swordsmen gripped their longswords and were a bit nervous due to fear. It wasn't until Han Sha-O had rushed in front of the 2 of them and evaded 3 lightning bolts but was rendered greatly charred by 2 more that the 2 swordsmen and mage were overjoyed. The swordsmen intended on killing Han Sha-O after the mage had done his bit. It was a pity that they had no way of knowing how strong and durable Han Sha-O's body was. Although his body had injuries upon injuries after taking 2 bolts of lightning, he felt no pain in his enraged mental state. He crashed into the swordsman and mage, immediately giving rise to a struggle between life and death. After taking a few breaths in, he took 2 bolts of light from the swordsman's swords based purely on an indomitable will. He killed the Thunder Adept Mage who had miscalculating Han Sha-O's bodily strength and used the last bit of his magical yuan to severely injure another swordsman. His body finally thoroughly lost all strength and he sank down listlessly. "He's done for, help me kill him, hurry." The heavily injured journeyman swordsman lay in a puddle of blood and called out to the other fellow,